Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Madison Realty Capital, New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, AmTrust Title, Customers Bank, Ariel Property Advisors, Capital One Bank, Sterling National Bank, Marks Paneth LLP, Meridian Capital Group. Additional funding has been provided by grants from Amarant Bank, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, B6 Real Estate Advisors, CBRE, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chase Mortgage Lending, Citizens Bank, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott INC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Casamatidis Red Apple Group, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Matone Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Group, RPW Group, SJP Properties, Stonehenge NYC, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Merringore Family Foundation, and these friends. Seventh century, the family dates back. Involved in Georgia. Guy goes to school, graduates high school at 16, works for BP, works for the National Bank of Georgia. But he wants the American dream. He comes here to America. He really can't speak English too well. He can't find a job. He works as a laborer. He looks for the cemetery. But then he gets a job, an aide. And then he really chased Manhattan Bank. But he knows that his dream is in real estate, and he really wants to do it, in addition to getting involved with the restaurant. Today I have David Chase, who's going to tell me his full Georgian name.
Avtandyl Chkheidze.
Okay. Before we talk about the family, why did you change your name from
Avtandyl
to David Chase?
So when I first came here, it was very hard to, when I was starting having friends and first employment, surround me, nobody could pronounce my name. And one of the jobs, like, they asked me, can we call something else, or do we have any middle name? And my father had a friend who had Avtandyl and David. And I remember growing up in Georgia in my childhood, so I said, call me David.
So that's the David.
Yes.
The Chase?
The Chase, Bank of America wasn't available, so I took a Chase. I'm just kidding. Chase because I'm a chaser. I like to chase things. I want to get the things done. And one of my employments was, I was 20 years old. I got the turning 21 at the Chase Manhattan Bank. So I have many memories.
Many memories for Chase. So let's talk a little bit about the family in Georgia. As I said at the beginning, the family dates back to the 7th century in Georgia. But let's talk a little bit about your grandfather and grandmother, and then about your parents.
Sure. Our last name, Chkheidze, is coming from 7th century, almost like a Kennedy in America. It's a big last name, and we're very proud of. We have our family seal. And my grandfather was a principal in a high school, and for 35 years, and my grandma was a teacher as well, and that's how they met in a high.
Now, that's your mother's side or your father's side?
This is my father's side.
And your father subsequently becomes an engineer?
So he was born and raised in eastern Georgia, but he went to university in Capital, and he gets two degrees.
Now, you said to me your mother's side was more involved with the wine business.
Correct.
Georgia has great wines.
Yes, so we have amazing wines. Most people don't know about it. At the restaurant, we established the market right now, and we're becoming very popular. So my mother's side, like eastern part of Georgia, and most of 2/3 of eastern part of Georgia is a vineyard. So we have variety of wines, and my mom's family, they had private vineyards, and a lot of people growing up, my father's side had also small vineyards, so it's a common thing in Georgia.
So let's talk about you. You were born when?
I was born in capital, Tbilisi, 1977.
And at this time, your father was working for the bakeries.
When since I remember myself, he was running a chain of state-owned factory bakeries because he would supply the schools, libraries, and government organizations. And then when Soviet Union broke down, he privatized, and he had one and then added second private bakery.
So let's talk about growing up in Georgia before you went to college.
Before I went to high school, first, you know, 5 or 6 years, I ended up in eastern Georgia, not in capital. Even though I was born in capital, I basically grew up in eastern Georgia. Then I wanted to achieve more, and I asked my uncle at that time. He was a developer in Tbilisi, and he had his block and cement factory. At that time was state-owned, and then also private.
So you worked for the block and the cement factory.
He was working there, and I was very impressed. He was building apartment buildings, rental buildings, and I said to him, "Take me. I will, you know, work for you."
So you left your parents and you went to live with your uncle.
Uncle, correct. That's my 10th through the finish of my high school. So I finished my high school in Tbilisi.
So you finished your high school in Tbilisi. Is that when you get involved with stock market and trading?
Correct. So it was a fascinating story. So Georgia just became independent, and first stock market opened up, and I got the news through a friend, and he invited over. Even though I was 15, 16 at that time, I was very interested in numbers. I did very well in math back in, you know.
And you borrowed $2,000 from your uncle, correct?
I borrowed $2,000 from my uncle, and I started trading. At that time, $2,000 was a lot of money, and I got him back within.
You paid him back.
I paid him back within a week or two, and then he said, "Are you doing something legal?" Or I said, "Of course." He knew me, but he really doubted how I made this kind of money back, because almost $2,000 I can equivalent to probably 30,000 today.
So you paid him back, but then subsequently you lost it, right?
We lost it because the market changed. But then he was fascinated. He came with me, and he started investing in the stock market with me, and he loved it. He was like, "I'm gonna quit my job. We're making so much money." At that time, Georgia was going through a lot of changes because the currency change and inflation. It was thousands of percent inflation, and then at one moment we traded, and our money became paper. So we lost everything.
So you go to the university in Georgia for 2 years.
Correct.
How do you get the job that relates to BP for a couple of years?
You know, I was preparing for my exams. This was state-run exams. I passed it. I became a student, and then I really wanted to work. At that time was really tough times in Georgia. Civil War in 1989. We had a very big event happened April 9th. Our people died. Russian tanks came, and I was there in a capital. I was teenager, and it was happening in front of me. Everything has changed after the Soviet Union broke down. So I got a job first part-time at the bank, and also I was with multiple non-profit organizations. I was helping out different non-government agencies. raising money or whatever they needed. I was involved.
Right, but then there was the incident with the car and BP.
Yes, so my relative comes from eastern Georgia, comes to me and he goes, help me sell this car. I said, I have no time, I'm going to school. He was like chasing me. He was traveling, and one day I felt bad and like, okay, let's go, what do you want me to do? I've never sold a car, I'm not a car salesman, but he heard that some company, he didn't know the name, some companies buying the Soviet made cars who travel, into different remote areas, like almost like a trucks, the mini trucks, but he wanted to sell. So he knew that I spoke a couple of foreign languages, some bases.
Right, sell a car and then you go to work for BP part-time. You go to school at night.
Correct.
So now you're 20 years of age. You go for a student visa to come to America. How come you decided to come to America? You really didn't have any family here, okay? You didn't have much money, but how did you come to America?
I had no money. I was at the BP. It was a subsidiary of BP. It was a first and only international pipeline going through country of Georgia, and I through the nonprofit organizations, I had the opportunity to travel to Europe to do the 1 month, and I took a 1 month off from my work. And when I came back, and it was eye-opener for me, and I was fascinated I said, I have to get out from here because to achieve better in my life. And I applied for a visa, and somehow I got the visa.
What day do you come over?
I came in the States 1998, February 17.
Okay, and at that time you didn't have anybody, but you knew some young Georgian who lived in Jamaica, correct?
Correct. Through a friend, I got somehow phone number. I came with literally $120 in my pocket.
And a suit.
My uncle, I borrowed, but eventually he gave me as a gift the first suit ever, and at that time, and I knew this number. I arrived in JFK, have nobody, doesn't really speak English, and I called the guy, and I ended up in Jamaica in a basement, and I was paying $10 a night.
Right. Then there's an opportunity to do some cemetery work, but that job, when you go to the cemetery, they're on strike, so you couldn't work over there. Subsequently, you end up in Union, New Jersey. What happens in Union?
So I go to New Jersey for the job interview, and they somehow they didn't tell me exactly what was the job description, so it was a wrong interview to say. It was a mom and pop type agency, and I'm coming back. And before I came back to New York City, I lived in Jamaica in the basement.
Right, and you didn't have enough money for a ticket.
I didn't.
So you walk into this Greek diner, and what happens then?
It was a coffee shop and like a diner, small. He started asking me, "Are you lost?" I was with my suitcase. I had a small suitcase, and no, I'm not lost. I had the interview. Oh, I know this agency, and I was very upset that it was like. They mistreated kinda. It was not a job that they promised me, and he goes, "Don't worry about it. I can get you the construction job." So he basically he helped me to.
So from that, you did construction, working in Marshalls at night, where you'd work on the floor. How'd you get the job in Manhasset, New York, working for Sam Black as an aide for a blind man who had dementia?
So. Growing up, my mom's side, his father went to the World War II, and he came back. He came back blind from the war. He was totally blind, and that agent who I came first for the interview knew that I stayed in town and started offering me jobs, and I was declining jobs. I was working at night. Construction, traveling from Jersey to Philadelphia and outskirts of Philadelphia. at night jobs because department stores, Marshalls, and they were changing the floors. I
Right.
was on a team. And what happened was, calls me that broker, the Polish agency called me, and we have this job in Long Island, and I didn't know where Long Island was. Oh, you have to travel, and we have this to drive the blind man, and that's how it happened.
So formerly you worked for the Cheryl and Stephen Sokolov,
Solotov. This was Solotov's family.
and they take care of it, and then you basically live in as the aide to look after Sam Black, who was in the apparel business. Subsequently, you decide, you find out that Chase Manhattan Bank, where you took your name, David Chase, was looking for somebody who had some background. So what are you doing for Chase?
So I started working with the Chase. So family sponsored me. We became real good friends. They sponsored my brother. We started getting the paperwork because my only agenda was I have to stay legal in this country, work hard, learn English, and you go ahead. So I got as an entry level as a teller, but I quickly became head teller and then customer service. I had a few promotions within a...
Right, and when you're at Chase, they send you to Cornell for 35 credits of graduate program, so you get a certificate. One day, what happens? Your boss gets fired?
So what happened, I'm one of the branches, I changed every promotion I would change and move from branch to branch. Branch manager gets laid off, and I became close with him because I was second in line to become a branch manager at that time. And I'm almost 3 years at the banking, and I have the very good record in the industry and into the district. But this small incident really affected me, that they laid him off, like they almost
Right,
unreasonably.
So you said to yourself, if this could happen to somebody over there, I need to find something more stable. So as opposed to stability, where you had a salary at Chase, you take a job with East Coast Mortgage.
East Coast Capital.
East Coast Capital as a mortgage broker.
Correct. I wanted to be independent, and I didn't. It was kind of became too boring for me, that job. I wanted to create more value than become a regular employee.
So you're a residential mortgage broker, and subsequently, how do you change from a residential mortgage broker to a real estate salesman?
Instantly, I doubled and tripled my income in East Coast Capital. I had a very good mentor and trainer, but I was more outgoing. I made money, I saved some money, and now I was looking to invest the money. And I knew what I needed. I had my first car, but I wanted to invest in real estate. And I started to look in markets like Ridgewood and Bushwick and different parts of the city. And I started dealing with brokers. And one broker basically told me, you have natural skills, you're a likable guy, and you want to work for me. And I'm opening the brokerage in Manhattan. And I'm very entrepreneurial spirit, and I always dreamed to me coming in the States was all high rises and
Right, so
Manhattan.
but the first job is a salesman of residential apartments, correct?
Correct.
What company was that?
It was a small mom and pop company, RCI Real Estate, but quickly I landed through the Solotov's family. I landed a commercial deal close to Times Square, and it was an eye opener for me. And then I switched to In-Town Realty, Upper West Side, where I spent 5 years helping out, managing buildings, really learning multifamily product. And I had approximately under my portfolio 1,000 apartment exclusive almost. And I was renting 100 to 150 apartments average a year. While I was doing that, I started diversify and go to the next step, doing retail leasing. And then from retail leasing, I started selling buildings because that was like a natural progression.
Now, what year is this?
So this is 2001. I started at real estate company. I got the license.
Right, but in 2007, you go back to Georgia to build buildings with your uncle. What's that?
So Georgia became independent and started having. It was a development boom in 2005, 6, and 7. And my uncle privatized his own company and started building the private kind of condominium type buildings and mixed-use properties. And he would send me the projects, the planning, the drawings, and he knew I was in real estate here, so he would ask me the advice, or we would have a conversation. And then one project he offers me like, okay, I want to offer you partnership, and you have to come. So I took a risk and I went to at the end of 2007.
Right, and things were good, but then the deal doesn't do well, right? And you and your uncle lose some money on the deal.
Yeah, unfortunately, he passed away. I rest his soul. But he was a very good but timing was wrong also. It
Right,
was
it was the recession.
It was
So you come back over here, and you're with In Town Realty at this time.
correct.
How do you meet the people at Masinaco?
So I want to add one thing though. We built one building, and we were very proud of the first building, 10-story mixed use, 24-unit rental, and then we were jumping to second and third, and that's where the big recession happened. But when I came back, I went to In Town Realty. At that time, I already became a partner of In Town Realty, but I wanted to do more. I wanted to do the sales, and then at that time I had a network of people wanting to buy the properties, and I didn't know where to. And my partner, and I learned from him a lot. He at Upper West Side, he told me, call guys at Masinaco and others.
So you meet Paul and Bob.
I started doing as an outside broker. I started doing
Joint ventures. Co-broker.
Co-broke deals.
So when do you join Masinaco?
So right away, I was fascinated by Masinaco's platform, territory system, and seller representation, and I thought that was, and especially I became friends with the Upper West Side team, and one day I took them out for lunch. It's like, get me in the company, but there was no territories available. As you remember, it was a territory based, so I was begging them like every 6 months, anything came up. So one day in Real Deal, I see the Masinaco is opening up. It was an ad, simple, small ad at the opening retail division. So I was one of the first.
Okay, so you go there, you work for Ben Fox.
Yes.
Then Masinaco subsequently is acquired by Cushman.
Cushman & Wakefield.
You spend a little time at Cushman, and then you go to another brokerage firm.
I became a Long Island City, Astoria territory broker. I started brokering the deals, big development sites. I sold Fresh Direct with Bob Knuckle, and the guys were surrounded me. I was learning. I was like a sponge. I was learning everything, how to do the deals, and then I started my own company, One Commercial, at the end of 2016.
Right, and then in 2018, Paul Massey goes out, creates a company called B6 Real Estate Advisors, and he brings you on as one of his partners. That's where you are today, and they're very happy that you're over there. Tell me a little bit about how you decide to open up a restaurant.
So trace back many years back, even my grandfather's father had a restaurant and entrepreneur back in the days, and his grandfather had also something related to that. And my father, when he was growing up, he really liked, probably in his childhood worked at the restaurant. And
So-
that was my father's dream.
So
to
then you open
the-
up on Bleecker Street, correct?
Old Tbilisi Garden, which is the capital of Georgia. It's on a village
Right.
on
And
Bleecker
you open
Street.
that on July 4th because you're a citizen and proud of that.
A few years before I became a U.S. citizen, and it's a big day for me, 4th of July, and I made sure that opened that day.
So in a similar manner, let's talk about how you meet your wife.
It was 2009. We met here through a friend.
She's from the Ukraine.
Ukraine. I chased her back in Ukraine. I flew 13 times to get her.
When did you get married?
We got married in 2012. We have a son, just turned 1, Noah. I call him Noah Chase.
Noah Chase. Let's talk about Mom. Dad passed on just a day before you opened up the restaurant.
Unfortunately, we lost my father through cancer. He was battling cancer. And before the opening the restaurant, he knew that we were building out. He passed a week before, and I had to bury him in Georgia because that was his, he was origin from there, so that's his will.
Mom lives in Ridgewood?
Ridgewood, Queens,
Right.
with my brother.
Your brother who came over 1 year after you.
Correct.
And then you have another brother also in...
I have a younger brother in Georgia. He has a beautiful wife and 2 beautiful kids. He was 11 years old and 12 years old. He became a national chess champion, and now he works for local IRS in Georgia. As he loved math, and he, in the accounting department.
So the good part is that America has truly seen a hardworking individual who's wanted to be here and who's worked hard for it. And the other good thing is that my friend Paul Massey and his partners, Tom Donovan and the rest of the team, are lucky to have a guy like David Chase, or your real name is?
Avtandyl Chkheidze.
Okay. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for what you do for industry.